is an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Sunshine by Robin McKinley, the final episode, in which SOF gets real pushy, doesn't wind up getting anything, and it seems now that Khan is going to be a permanent part of Ray's life. Everything is weird in this last section. I don't know what to think. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha, and thank you very much to Rosalie for commissioning this final episode covering the very last section of Sunshine. I am really not sure how I feel about this ending. I don't dislike it. It's not just outright oh God, what is this? It didn't quite feel satisfying, but I'm not sure that's a fault of the writing so much as maybe there isn't a satisfying ending to a story like this, period. And I think it was just, it was left so open-ended, which I don't normally have a problem with, but I think for me, I'm genuinely concerned about Ray's mental health and well-being, and she seems so alone in the world. And I guess Khan sort of pledging, I use the word pledging when that feels like too formal a word for what goes on. But I feel like Khan's sort of promise to remain in her life is meant to sort of undercut concern about her being lonely, because at least she has one person who is going to remain by her side after everything that they went through together, and she won't have to keep her secrets from everybody that she knows. But it's not enough, because her connection with Khan is, I'm not discounting it's being meaningful. It's just that she doesn't understand the way that he responds to her sometimes. So there's not that emotional, real connection there. It's just more that, well, at least he knows what happened, which is bare minimum and does not feel like it's going to be enough for her to connect or just have that bond with anybody. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm talking babbling over here, but I guess I'll wait and get there. Because first we have to deal with SOF. So my theory last episode was that I felt Khan's obviously going to have to get staked, right? Because they're going to know he's a vampire right away. Spoiler, they do not. He is passing for human. And I don't know why. I guess I figured that their trip and the battle took so long. I unconsciously assumed that by the time that they got out of this battle, it would be daylight out. So it's not. And thus he is able to pass and nobody can tell. There's obviously something weird about him, but it seems more just that he's really ugly. And there's this, where's the thing? I'm a little dizzy. Patted the bind where my shoulder was and then pulled its plug. It thwumped and collapsed. He made to take my arm, help me stand up, but I flinched away, saying, "Please don't touch me." He nodded, but I could see he was worried. The way I must look would worry anyone. And the way the little ring of SOFs around us moved, they were ready to drop me again at the first sign of new trouble. So this is a real this just brought up so many things that I had not considered about how to handle this situation. I did not have any good answers, and I just have come to realize that the more that I read, not only in fiction, but in news stories and things like this as well, I'm realizing that I am too open to a variety of possibilities to take quick action on things. Like, I am immediately aware of all of the ways in which what I say now could potentially go wrong, could be inaccurate, could be misconstrued. And when under pressure, I'm afraid to take any action at all because I'm sure there are going to be ripple effects that basically, I don't have a lot of confidence that I know enough about any given situation to make a good call on how to handle it. And I don't mean that about everyday stuff. I mean that when I watch a video where somebody's in trouble and another person jumps in and helps them out, I often think about how I would react in that exact scenario and realize that I might not have acted because I'd be like, well, maybe this is are these people doing this on purpose? Do they know each other? Is this a setup? I immediately go to these weird explanations rather than the Occam's razor of somebody needs help. And in this scene, when the way that she handles SOF, it's best case scenario, honestly, because she just decides to let Khan, who is thousands of years old, or at least 1,000 years old, she decides to just let him do his thing and trust the fact that since he's older and been around the block that he's probably had to lie and be a little shady here and there. So she lets him do that and then relies on just not saying anything. And in order to do that and have the confidence to do that, you've got to trust that there was no evidence that they found that refutes your story or your version of your story. And I was so paranoid throughout that entire scene that she was going to say something and it was going to turn out that SOF had her against a wall and had proof, video, or I don't know, I'm about to say DNA evidence, but there's literal body parts everywhere. So good luck finding any conclusive DNA evidence and all that. But I felt like there had to be an ace up SOF's sleeve and that they were leading her into a trap that she had set for herself, if that makes sense. So when she decides on a path and a way to handle this, I actually felt like such relief reading it because I knew in her shoes I would not have been able to settle on a plan. And the way that she and Khan sort of seem to work together is, again, too strong a word. It's like they sense what the other is feeling or going to say, or the type of story that they're going to go with. And they're able to sort of corroborate, or at the very least, vaguely support one another's stories. It is surprising that they're questioned in the same room. I would feel like SOF would want to separate them and make sure that they're not questioned in the same room. But of course, she needs to be in the same room so that when the goddess of pain pulls the blinds open, he can't get burned. So the goddess of pain apparently thinks that Khan's a vampire at one point. And when he does not burst into flames, it's not even that it seems that she no longer thinks he's a vampire. It's more that she's like, well, I mean, I still think he's a vampire, but he's not burning. So what's going on? She's a little too smart. I am so confused about what the deal is with her. Can we just talk about the goddess of pain for a second? Nobody has said that she's part demon, but she has an aura around her that is painful to be around. And magic handler, she's been called a magic handler, but is that common? Is that something that you run into with every magic handler that just feels like such a specific and dangerous and like upsetting side effect. I don't know. I just find that whole thing with her so strange. And I want to know more about what her objectives are, because she does not seem to be amenable to anything in particular. Like, she's not somebody who I feel like has specific loyalties in one direction or another and is trying to like skew the results of investigations towards a certain... she's not working on an agenda that I can tell. So she's just a hard ass who does not respect people's boundaries at all and trolls through their minds, which she's not technically supposed to do. And I do not understand what the pain factor is. Is she like actually torturing people sometimes? Is she meant to like... Everybody seems very aware that she's doing that, and yet nobody's coming down on her for it. I would imagine that's illegal. I would imagine that working in, like, what's the equivalent of a supernatural FBI, that if there's a magic handler magically torturing folks, and everybody knows about it, that there's going to be some kind of disciplinary action taken. And I just really want to know exactly what she wants to find out. Is it just that she really wants the truth? Is it that she's, what's the word I want? Like bigoted against part demons, and that's part of why they all have their backs up against her, is that she's just like... But I don't see somebody who's a magic handler being so intolerant of other soups. So... I just don't really understand her character. Like, I feel like she's sort of presented as another big bad that Ray has to deal with, or at least like a bad, if not another big bad. She is a bad that is an obstacle and a pain, and pun intended. And she's a really good rallying point to cause SOF workers who wouldn't normally band together to join forces in order to defy her. And that's a convenient thing to have, that nothing unites, like love, trust, and a desire for the common good do not unite people as much as a common enemy. And I believe that. But I just don't really get what she wants, what she's doing specifically to people when she works. There's just vague comments about how you don't want to be caught alone in a room with her, or you don't want her asking these questions, or yada, yada, yada. And that seems like somebody should be doing something about that. So yeah, the fact that I don't really understand her is kind of like distracting me, I think, a little bit. And so throughout this scene, I'm not really like her throwing open the blinds and being like, aha, you're a vampire. And it's one of those things where it's like, I don't, I wish that, like, I'm on Khan's side, don't get me wrong. He has been paired up with Ray on getting Bo. This whole thing would not have been possible without him. He's like a maniac killing machine once they get into this battle. But it always makes me feel strange when the person who is on the opposite side of what's right, or what the character, the protagonist wants, is actually like dead ass correct in their assessment of things. And I don't really know what it is that Ray is specifically afraid of here, besides the obvious of everybody thinks vampires are bad guys. So Khan would be killed. Like, right? He'd be staked the moment that they knew, if he didn't light on fire, if they figured it out in some other way, they would stake him because vampires are bad. But what is it about everything that happened that they can't talk about? Like, because Ray, I guess, doesn't want them to know that she's a magic handler at all, I suppose, is part of it. Because if they pretended to still both be human, she could tell a pretty intense story about like learning to function together using magic and being able to take somebody like Bo out. And I guess that would make her feel too beholden to SOF, that them knowing that she'd have the capability of doing that would be like a big, it would just be something around her neck that they would try and drag her in for all the time to help them, because she has this ability that apparently they didn't know about, that's even beyond what happened with like the knife out in the park. I guess I just want that outlined a little more. I guess it's just, I don't want to be involved in SOF. I don't want to work with them. I don't want to be part of this like task force that's meant to take vampires out as a whole without any consideration at all. But in this scene, I don't know. There was something about it that didn't quite work for me. It was tense and it was well written in that Khan is really good at dodging the actual questions or answering the question without giving any of the actual information within his answer that she actually was looking for. And I always enjoy reading that sort of thing where people are like having a conversational like battle that is really subtle, but definitely there for anybody who's actually paying attention. I don't know. I think it's just not knowing what SOF is about, not understanding the goddess of pain too well and what her whole deal is. And also the fact that, you know, obviously this ends and Pat still seems to be on her side, but she doesn't tell him anything. And I don't think she should at this point, but I want to believe that she'd eventually be able to confide in him. And the way this ends, I'm not sure that's going to happen at all either. It just feels, I don't know, maybe it's just that it's lonely. It just seems like a really sad, lonely ending. And she's having a ton of trouble recovering from their victory. And if you can hear the air quotes I'm saying victory with, because it is really a question in her mind as to whether or not this counts. Because she's so fucked up over it and has nightmares about it or just can't sleep at all. She just can't stop thinking about what it means that she was capable of doing the things that she was, and how that changes her view of herself, how seeing Khan fight like that changed her view of him as well. And there's also a detail about how she becomes totally sure that there is something wrong with her hands. And that wrongness is like contagious to her. So she doesn't want to use her hands to touch the food that she's going to eat. She doesn't want to use her hands to touch another person and like take something out of their hand. She doesn't want to use her hands for anything because those are the same hands that ripped Bo's heart out of his chest. And so there's like a combination of things happening here. There seems to be like a physical reaction when she grabs him, where she feels something like entering her bloodstream and she feels the wound on her breast open again and begin to bleed again. But when she checks later on, the wound is not open again. It does, like, the scar seems to be a little bit worse than it used to be, but the wound has closed itself, and her hands do not have the tiny little veins of like blue and black running up them that she had spotted earlier, which she thought signaled that there was something going on, like blood poisoning due to like the profound malignance of Bo. And Khan tells her it's not that the evil infected you, it's the idea of evil that has gotten under your skin. And just the idea of it is enough to hurt you, and you need to reject it. And that will keep you from actually getting sick from it, because it's not that it's not real. It's just that it's not an actual like force that exists outside of you. It's something that you can create or uncreate with your mind at will. And so you have to determine that it is not real and that you don't believe in it, and it will stop. Which seems to be true. Like when she checks later, it's gone. There's nothing on her hands. And like I said, the scar is not open again. it's a really interesting idea it's like a Lady Macbeth sort of scenario where she seems to feel that because of what she did, ripping somebody's hearts out, because she gets several vamps before she hits Bo. It's like the out damn spot out scene where she has blood on her hands or evil on her hands, and she does not think that she's going to be able to get free of it. That what she did is going to stick with her in a way that will slowly kill her. It will slowly eat away at her, cause her to rot, and kill her. That's a lot. You know, like, I was really surprised. Like, I expected this, you know, these moments when she gets home. I thought it would be awkward and strange because they're being questioned, because he's, you know, posing as human, and there's this weird alliance that's still happening, even though technically there's no need for it anymore because SOF is no longer questioning them and they have killed Bo, so there's no need for any more of that. So the awkwardness around it all was completely expected, but I never thought about just the trauma of that battle sticking with her the way that it did, because they accomplished exactly what they set out to. This wasn't a surprise. And I say that with an asterisk. It was a surprise that she was capable of doing this and that she did it so many times. It was not a surprise that she was put in the position of having to do this. She knew she was going in for a fight. It was just that the relish with which she got into it and the damage she caused, I don't think she thought was a possibility. So it's a sort of a strange thing where she's like got this trauma and this guilt all tied up with a feeling of like weird, distant satisfaction over the fact that Bo is indeed dead. That this thing that has been hanging over her for so long, making her feel unsafe, has finally been dealt with. But the relief isn't what she had thought it would be. And it's been sort of replaced by this other nebulous, like, collection of conflicting emotions. She wasn't expecting to have to deal with the results because she thought they would die. That's a really good point. I forgot about that. Like, she walks into this thinking that there aren't going to be any consequences that she needs to worry about because she's going to be dead. And yet here she is having to deal with the consequences of it, having to deal with like going and seeing her family and other people every day who don't know, and like continuing to lie about this other weird life that she's leading. So, and I'm wondering if Khan felt that way as well. Like, you know, she doesn't really talk to him in a deep way, but I wonder if she is, if Khan was also as sure as she was that he wasn't going to be coming back. Because I feel like Khan definitely understood that there was an enormous risk. But that's, you know, he's lived long enough that risk can't be that big a deal to him. So let's see. I'm trying to find some stuff that I wanted to quote that I hadn't mentioned. Oh my God, I forgot. I was hoping you might be able to tell me. We got a report that it was raining body parts in No Town. Really freaked some of the clubbers. Yeah, it would. Oh my God. I realized the reason Khan looked peculiar was because he was passing. Don't ask me how he was doing it, but SOF thought he was human. And I'm trying to see if there's anything, because I feel like this section is like, I'm looking at the time. I'm at like halfway. I'm at like, you know, under 30 minutes here. And I don't know what to say about it beyond what I have. I'm feeling so... This doesn't feel like the end of the story to me. This doesn't feel like a finale episode or finale chapters. Like, I still have it in my head that I'm going to get another commission for the next episode and we're going to continue this. Because what it boils down to is we get picked up by SOF. We don't tell them anything. Khan and I go home together, and I'm really struggling with this. I take a bath, I make some food, he can't eat, he drinks some orange juice, cuddles me so that I can finally fall asleep, and then we decide that we're going to stay friends. That's kind of everything. And I don't really want them to stay friends beyond the fact that, like, they have this shared experience and she needs somebody in her life who gets that. But I'm not that big a fan of Khan. Khan doesn't have a whole lot of personality to me, to be perfectly honest. I'm not here for him. Do you think Ray is likable as a main character, and do you think that's a good or bad? I think she's definitely likable. I think she's really relatable. I think that she's a very unusual type of character in that she isn't used as like, oh, this is the everyman character. You know how that is, where they'll make a female main character in these kinds of stories is often treated as such a blank slate for the reader to put themselves in the protagonist's position in the story, that it renders them almost lacking in personality altogether. And Ray is definitely not like that. I like how honest she is with her flaws and likes and dislikes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's she's just really specific and dresses in really bright, loud colors. She loves being out in the sun and sunbathing, but she's also like a huge bitch when she's in the kitchen and in a bad mood, but she loves feeding people. Like, these are all very strong, specific personality traits that I can hold on to, and that, as somebody who likes to cook and loves bright colors, like, I found her very relatable. I'm looking at this description of Khan. It was yellow. He wrapped the blanket around himself. It was yellow and didn't help his complexion. He was impressive as a vampire, but mostly just ugly as a human. There was a kind of threateningness to his ugliness, but you couldn't have said why. There was a study once about whether ugly or good-looking people are more imposing. Generally, the uglier you are, the less imposing, till you reach a sort of nadir of ugliness, and then you get really imposing. I thought Khan just missed the nadir. Just. He was also shorter as a human. I didn't get this at all, but if it meant the goddess would underestimate him, that would be expedient, possibly even life-saving. Although I wasn't sure how I felt about going on having my life repeatedly saved. Yeah, you know what? I feel that. So, yeah, this... Pat also doesn't want to leave the goddess alone with the two of them, which I feel like the lines around the goddess's mouth got harder and her mouth more pinched, and we were all going to pay for it. Do you think the goddess is on the side of good? That's what I mean, actually, Rosalie. Like, I really don't know. I don't know enough about her. All I know is that everyone around her doesn't like her and that she radiates something that's, like, painful. Frankly, whether or not you're on the side of good, if you radiate something that causes everyone around you to be in pain, I feel like there's got to be some control you have over that. And you're allowing people to be in pain when they're around you simply because they're around you, which doesn't seem like something a good person would do. By the same token, I haven't seen her do anything straight up wrong except for trying to troll in Ray's head, which, I have to be honest, Ray's lying her balls off throughout all of this book. And if I were in the goddess's position and I could sense that this weirdo girl was clearly lying about something, I can't say that I would be above doing something like that, because I would get so frustrated by being blocked all the time on every question. So that's one of those things that it's like, it could be representative of being a bad person. It could also just be representative of being a ruthless person. And ruthless doesn't necessarily mean bad. Ruthless on the side of trying to find the truth is often considered a really admirable trait. And if she's reading someone's mind, is she not after the truth? Is that a complete violation of boundaries? Sure. But I don't really know anything else about her. And so that's, I think, part of what I found so difficult in this scene is that they can't tell her anything, or they don't want to tell her anything. And I am concerned that she'll figure, because I know that obviously Khan will be in danger, but I don't really feel like I'm against her either. I'm not totally Team Rey snowing the goddess of pain. Part of me feels like you could be a little bit more on, like, you don't have to tell her exactly what happened. You don't have to tell her that Khan is a vampire. But I feel like they could tell a little bit more of the story instead of just being like, oh, I don't remember. Which, how long can you go on saying that every time something happens to you before everybody just starts to, like, push you harder and harder? I mean, yeah. So whether she's on the side of good or not, I don't know. And I want to know because I feel like that would help me in this scene a little bit. And, you know, also there's the fact that she's like a female boss, and the fact that everybody hates her. There's also like that sort of niggling at my brain where I'm like, well, do they all hate her just because of what she does or who she is? Like, is there any, and I don't think there's an element of that, but it seems significant to me that all like the lower level SOFs that Rey deals with are all dudes. I don't know. Like, if you have this vampire destroying power, do you have a responsibility to share your secrets given that vampires will soon take over the world? Yeah, that's the question, right? It's like, this actually reminds me, so I'm going to do a little bit of a spoiler for a Sookie Stackhouse book that I've finished a little bit ago. Sookie is part of a disaster. A building gets blown up. And she's nearby, and she volunteers to help get people out of the rubble of the explosion by seeking out minds that are still active in the rubble. And in doing this, helps save a bunch of lives because the AMTs can't tell where bodies are buried. So she can help with finding people who are still alive, and she can tell them not to rush certain areas where they do find a body because that person's already gone. The thing is that when she starts to give them this help, they realize that she is a telepath, and they zero in on her a lot and start to want to like involve her in more stuff that she could help with. And while in theory, the idea of having a steady job using this skill of helping people, saving lives, assisting with like convicting criminals, all of that in theory seems like a really good thing. It would result in her having to constantly be in the brains of people who had committed horrible crimes and seeing that, like from first person perspective, seeing them commit the crime and having that like burned into her brain. Or it would be her going to disaster sites and having to listen in to the terrified minds of people who are dying. And how can you move past that? Like, do you keep like, and not only how do you move past just the act of doing that, but once an organization like the FBI, say, got a hold of her being able to do this, what kind of life do you live after that? Your entire life becomes these sorts of investigations, this sort of work. You get wrapped up in stuff that's like super dangerous all the time or just really draining and upsetting. And they would always be able to call you in on it because they know that your desire to do good trumps your own mental health for you. And it's a trap, essentially. And while she doesn't doubt that she could do some good, she would have to sacrifice so much in order to do it that she's just not sure it's worth it. And that's where I feel like Rey is here, is that what she'd have to do would be so brutal and nerve-wracking and draining and exhausting that being asked to do this one more time would be too much. And they would ask her to do it a lot more than one more time. This single solitary incident is going to scar her for life. And I just don't think that she can face any more of that. And I really, I do understand that. And in that sense, during that scene, I don't want them to find out exactly what she can do. I just wish that there was a reason specifically for the goddess of pain that I could be even more firmly on Ray's side. Because where I stand now, the goddess of pain just seems like an insufferable hard ass who seems on the surface to want the right thing. And I'm not really sure, beyond that, we can't demand perfection from everybody who's supposed to be on the side of good. There are going to be people who are on the side of good who they themselves are kind of assholes. That's going to happen. And just because they're an asshole doesn't mean you throw the whole thing away. And that's where I'm kind of feeling like the people who work for her in SOF undermining her and talking shit about her all the time. I can't help but wonder if they're shooting themselves in the foot, because you're going to be glad you have somebody who's really threatening and fearsome on your side when the shit really starts to go down. So I have a feeling the goddess of pain could start to get a lot of people turning to her for help once shit starts to get bad. That's a Will Graham situation. Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's a Hannibal TV show reference for those of you who don't know. But yeah, Will Graham, same thing. He can put himself into the mind of a serial killer or a murderer or whatever so well that it freaks him out and starts to sort of take over his life. And yeah, and I'm gonna read some of these last bits, because she when they're home again. So let's see. I had to touch him. I tried not to, but he was too strong. Sunshine, he had no power to hurt you physically. He had had no such power for many years. His strength was in his will, and in the physical strength of those he controlled by his will. If his creatures, his acolytes, had not hurt you, he could not. I wanted to say he did hurt me. His creatures did hurt me. They taught me what I could do. He almost killed me, I said at last, aloud, feebly. This was an unendurably anticlimactic way of describing what had happened. Merely dying seemed like a minor difficulty, like an alarm clock that had failed to go off or a car that wouldn't start. Maybe I had been hanging out with vampires too much. Yes, by sheer force of evil. Only that. Only that, I said. Only that. Yes. So this is what I'm talking about. This situation where he's talking to her, and yes, he's the only person in quotes, who was there and who knows and who she can talk to about this. But Khan doesn't seem to get it either. Khan does not appreciate how the fact that he almost killed her with the force of his evil will is worse in some ways than the fact that he physically almost killed her. There's mental shit is much harder to bear in a lot of ways. So this conversation where she's coming to him and trying to explain to him why she's hurting, and he's just sort of being well, that's what happened. It does not have any satisfying tone to it that makes me think that he gets it. Then after that, he kisses her hands, and I feel like maybe if I saw this, it would feel more okay, that was a nonverbal, sort of, what's the word I want? A nonverbal acknowledgement that I don't understand and I'm trying to comfort you and maybe I'm not doing a great job. But in the moment reading it, it doesn't feel like that's what's happening. And my hands, I thought I was coming to pieces. I'm not sure I'm not. My hands are two fragments of what is left of me. There was a pause. Yes, said Khan. How do you know? I whispered. He didn't move. He said, I see it in your eyes. I cannot read your secrets, but I can read your fears. My kind are adept at reading fear, and you look into my eyes as no other human ever has. You are not afraid of everything, he said. Nearly, I said. I am afraid of you. I am afraid of me. Yes, he said. And she says there was a curious comfort in that yes. But that's all we get in how she feels about this moment. And I just don't really know, beyond the fact that they shared this experience, what she's going to get out of continuing to see him. The one part that, like, within this conversation that I actually really liked was I was going to have some more scars, and the texture of the final weave was going to change, was changing. It was going to be lumpier, and there were going to be some pretty weird holes. I never had been able to learn to knit. I don't do uniformity and consistency. Even my cinnamon rolls tend to have individual personality. I could probably cope with a few more wodgy bits in my own makeup. Maybe my medulla oblongata was refusing to take any crap from my cerebrum again. Shut up and get on with the reconstruction. If you can't find the right piece, use the wrong one. Which I actually really do like, the idea that, like, you know, you can heal, but you're not necessarily going to be the same on the other side. There's an idea of healing is like being a returning to exactly how you were before you got hurt, which is not what that actually means. And it shouldn't be. If we make a mistake or experience trauma or anything and we return to exactly who we were before that ever happened, that means we're not living our lives, and it means that we are not absorbing lessons or learning anything. So what we look like on the other side should be different, and if it's the exact same perfectly smooth piece of cloth we started off with, then we're doing it wrong. Something's wrong there. So I actually really liked that description of, like, the weave and the way that it gets lumpier and that there are holes in it in places. There's, like, I don't know, it feels very poetic, and I normally say that in a sort of, like, derogatory way, but I swear I mean it as a compliment. So that I really enjoyed, and trying to find what the other thing was. She takes the bath, and the chain, because he had given her that chain that was supposed to accentuate her abilities. And she had that mesh, like, netting that her landlady gave her, and both of them seem to be gone. But when she reaches into the closet a little bit later, she's able to see the, like, intricate pattern on her skin a little bit. And when she says something to Bo about the scar of the necklace and that it's gone forever, he says that it's not gone. So evidently it was able to sort of transmute into something that she can have on all the time, which is really kind of rad. Like, I'm not sure I'd want to be sporting a honking big scar all the way around my neck, but the fact that she doesn't have to remember to put on a specific piece of jewelry and that it's literally part of her body and accentuating what she can do, that's pretty rad. Rosalie says, what advice would you give Ray for her life and future? It's a good question. I wish Ray would trust more people. Because really, that keeps coming back up for me, is this loneliness for her. And she likes to be alone more than a lot of people. So I think it's easy for her to fall into it thinking that she's just doing what she likes. Sort of in the same vein as, like, her and Mel not talking about things together, and that being part of what she likes about their relationship, and then realizing that what she likes about the relationship may be the very thing that winds up undoing it. That she likes to be by herself, but the fact that she isolates and doesn't trust people and doesn't confide anything to anyone will wind up making her so alone that when shit goes down, nobody's going to know what the fuck is happening with her. And she won't be able to just do a short version and explain to somebody why she needs the help. So, you know, at the very least, I want to know what the deal is with Mel. Like, it's hinted throughout the book that he is something else, but we never find out what. I do think that he cares about Ray in a real way, and I think that he wants to help her. And she never lets him get close enough to do that. And I don't understand what her reservations are concerning him specifically, because Mel, more than anyone, seems like a person who can keep a fucking secret. So at least him being involved, I would really like for her. But anybody knowing more about what's going on, because obviously Khan not being human is much more of a barrier to their understanding of each other than being a vampire is in a lot of other fiction. Like, you know, there's the tortured vampire who like has to kill people but regrets it and doesn't want to do it and whatever, because he still retains a lot of like his human understanding of the value of life. There's like, you know, vampires that still live like regular people and go out to fucking concerts and go grocery shopping and whatever. But Khan, he's a monster. He doesn't fit this sort of oh, well, I still can interact with you like a regular person sort of standard. So I just feel like she needs somebody else. And Khan is just her sort of leaning into this loneliness and using him as like, well, this is better than nothing. But is he? Because he's not going to get you either. It's like the tiniest baby step where I'm like, I want you to confide in other people so that you can connect with them on an emotional level and let them see you and understand you. And she's like, well, I can't do all of that, but I'll at least confide in somebody. And it's like, but if that person doesn't really seem to understand you, does that confiding mean anything? And is it confiding if they were there for the thing that happened? So you don't have to take any risk because they were there and they know about it. There's no vulnerability to that at all. It's just that they were there, so they know. And you don't have to worry about whether they'll believe you. You don't have to worry about the pain of retelling it. I don't know. So yeah, I feel like the way this ended made me more concerned for Ray than anything that has happened so far. You know, it just seems to like be that she's really leaning into some of the aspects of her personality that are the most, that hold the most potential for her to hurt herself. Maybe it's not better than nothing, because if she had nothing, then she might seek help elsewhere. Yeah, that's a good point. It's like, because Khan being somebody who was there, it's almost like she can pretend that this is a real connection. And the two of you simply having shared an experience, if both of you came at it from a completely different place, did you even really share the experience the same way? Like, he killed vampires and he's clearly killed vampires before. Like, this is not the first time he's done this. For how long he's lived, I can't imagine this is the only battle that he's waged. And this is definitely the first time you've ever done this. And you killed vampires with your bare hands, literally. So, yeah, you were both there. And that's about as far as that connection goes. He can't possibly understand what this is like for her. So if that's all that it is, it's no way is that going to help her. But she can pretend enough, because she has him, that she doesn't need anybody else. So you're right. That might be worse. So yeah, that's where I'm at. So I didn't hate the ending, and I almost wonder if it's like meant to be a little worrisome. Like maybe it's supposed to, maybe she's saying something about that after you experience really intense trauma, that maybe you lean into habits that are bad for you, because that's how we often respond to things that make us uncomfortable or feel unsafe is we retreat into familiar behavior patterns. And that can be detrimental in the long run. Maybe that's exactly what Robin McKinley is trying to say here. I don't really feel that in my heart that that's what she's trying to do, but maybe if there was another book in this world, what would you want to read about? Oh, I feel like I said something about that one time, that there was something that I was super curious about. I think I would like to read about like the half demons, or the part bloods as they're called. And like what they get up to and get involved with. And is there like, there's got to be, you know, the way that all of these people who are in SOF are aware of each other. I feel like there has to be like a real underground culture going on. The Were Chicken book. Oh my God. Yes, that's what it is. The Were Chickens. Like, what a weird thing, right? That whole idea of these part bloods hidden amongst everybody and trying to pass and not being able to hide it at times. But then what if they aren't hiding it? And like, what if they're trying to hide it, they slip up, and the person who saw it is also a part, and then you like become friends with somebody who otherwise might not have known about it, and just all the things that could happen with it. It'd be, you know, really fascinating too to see all of because the way that she describes how demon blood can manifest and the different things that people can do or different ways they look are all so wildly different that I feel like just for the sake of that, it would be interesting to read, to see all of the ideas that she could come up with. I feel like there was another thing too. So we got part bloods. I want to read about, what is it that her landlady is called, where she makes, wordsmithing. I would like to read about how that works. I'm also curious about magic handlers, but that feels so much more done, I guess. Magicians that can, you know, do to like these. Somebody who specifically works on wards is so specialized and so and in such a way that I'm so unfamiliar with that I feel like that'd be pretty fascinating. So yeah, like maybe magic handlers, but in a grander sort of like magic handlers : wordsmithing, magic handlers : charm makers, like the very specific, different disciplines of handling certain things and whether or not you actually even need to be a magic handler to do some of that. There's also like, I would really like to know about the Voodoo Wars. Like there's just the prequel book that I would like to see as well of how that all went down, because it's just described in these vague terms. And I would really like to see the lead up and, you know, because I guess I've been functioning under the assumption that the Voodoo Wars coincided with when everyone suddenly became aware that vampires and demons existed. But I realize now that that's not said anywhere. So they, like, humans and demons and vampires could have been living amongst each other, knowing that they were living amongst each other for all of human history in this universe, for all that I know. I want to know what other towns are like, given that this is one of the biggest remaining cities. What's the landscape like around the world? Yeah, that too. Because it does seem like there are huge pockets that just nobody wants to live in anymore. And it's like almost like a nuclear waste sort of situation, except that it's magical. So there are just areas that you just don't want to go near anymore because they have puddles of green acid that will turn your hands into frogs, except that it's basically doing the equivalent of giving you a panic attack, which is what happens to poor Ray when they're out on their drive with SOF. And I don't even know if you can call it a panic attack if it seems like she saw the future, which is what I really feel like happened there. So yeah, I'm super curious about the Voodoo Wars and how all of that worked, and what the objective even was. Like, because I feel like Pat at one point says that those were all just distractions, those wars. And that's sort of the end of that conversation. And I want to know more about what he even means by that. Distractions from what? What are they really after if that's not it? Yeah, but this is just like such a rich world that she built. So there's so much for her to delve into if she decided to do another book. And it wouldn't have to be a sequel to this at all. Like, she doesn't have to even include Ray. I really like Ray as a character, and I wouldn't mind seeing more of Ray. But she could go in any number of directions because of all of the things that she has put into place that are just sort of poised and waiting for her to expand on them even more. That I feel like this could be a really rich, like, universe. You could do comics, you could do even just like people writing fan fiction and stuff would be fun. I bet that there's plenty out there, actually. I feel like there was another thing that I wanted to mention before wrapping on this, and I'm blanking out now, but thank you very much, Rosalie, for all of your questions, because yeah, there were some things that I wanted to talk about more that I didn't really think of, and the questions got me rolling on that. And this was just a really fun, strange book. It felt so different in so many ways than other books that I've read that on the surface you could say are similar. Like, oh, we have just this ordinary American girl who just, works doing an ordinary blue-collar job, and suddenly she gets sucked into intrigues with a vampire. And on the surface, it seems really cliche, but the whole tone of it and the way that it all happens and the absolute otherness of the vampires themselves and the state of the world overall is just so, so different that it felt like nothing else that I've read of this genre. If you can call just straight up vampire books like a genre in and of itself, which I feel like you can nowadays. Maybe supernatural or urban fantasy or whatever, but I feel like vampires really, there's enough of that out there that it can be its own genre. Yeah. Is there anything else, Rosalie, before I say goodbye? I want to thank you too specifically because you commissioned almost all of this book. So thank you so much. I really do I really am super glad to have read this, and it'll be one that I recommend to a lot of people. Although I'm definitely still mad at you for making me live read that section. So I'll never forgive you for that. And I never want to talk to you again. Oh man, I was thinking about that the other day. I was just like, just wincing all over again. What a weird moment in the story that was. Good Lord. All right, everybody. Well, thank you all so much for listening. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that if you read it, you feel the way that I did about it. And hit me up if you do and let me know what you thought. And until next time, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.